Every morning, before the sun even touched the sky, a poor woman walked to the same lonely grave, barefoot, carrying wilted flowers in her trembling hands. No one knew whose grave it was, until one stormy afternoon a black car stopped beside her. A man in a suit stepped out, the CEO of one of the biggest companies in the city. He looked at the same grave and whispered, "That's my wife's grave too." Every morning, long before the city awoke, a fragile woman named Mira walked alone through the misty streets. Her torn shawl barely shielded her from the biting cold, and her feet were cracked from walking barefoot on the rough ground. In her trembling hands, she clutched a handful of wildflowers, the kind that grew by the roadside. She couldn't afford to buy roses, but she believed it's not the price of the flower that matters, it's the love behind it. The path to the cemetery was long and quiet. Birds had not yet begun to sing, and the only sound was the crunch of gravel beneath her feet. When she reached the old graveyard, she paused, took a deep breath, and stepped toward a single grave, one that seemed to have aged with her. Its stone was cracked, its letters faint, but she still traced the name on it with her worn fingers every day, whispering softly, "I'm here again. I didn't forget you." For 7 long years, Mira repeated this ritual. Not a single day passed without her visit. She came when the sun blazed, when the rain poured, and even on days when her body ached so badly that every step felt like pain carved into her bones. The townspeople grew used to her silhouette, a small tired woman in faded clothes, kneeling beside an old grave, lost in her own world. They whispered rumors behind her back. "Maybe it's her husband's grave," some said. "No, I heard she lost her child," said another. But no one ever dared to ask Mira directly, because whenever she looked up, her eyes told a story too deep, too broken. Those who saw her couldn't hold her gaze for long. There was love, loss, and something else, something like guilt. After praying, Mira would sit in silence, sometimes talking softly as if the one beneath the ground could still hear her. "You remember that day?" she'd murmur. "The rain, the laughter, the promise we made." Her voice would break before she finished the sentence. Then she'd place the flowers, close her eyes, and whisper, "Until tomorrow." The graveyard keeper once asked her gently, "Mom, who rests here?" Mira smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. "Someone who once gave me a reason to live, and a reason to cry forever." And that was all she said. The truth behind her visits remained a mystery, but destiny doesn't keep secrets forever, and soon, one unexpected visitor was about to change everything. It was a cloudy afternoon when fate decided to break Mira's quiet rhythm. The sky hung low, heavy with unshed rain. She walked the familiar path, her shawl soaked from the drizzle, clutching her flowers close to her chest to protect them from the cold wind. Everything felt the same, the silence, the stillness, until she reached the cemetery gate and saw something that made her stop in her tracks. A black luxury car stood near the entrance, its polished surface reflecting the gray sky. Such a car had never been seen in this part of town. A tall man stepped out dressed in a dark suit, his shoes glistening even against the muddy ground. He looked completely out of place, like a man who belonged to the world of power, not grief. Mira hesitated, watching from a distance as the man began walking through the rows of graves. He moved slowly, his face tight with sorrow, a bouquet of white lilies in his hand. She thought he must be here for someone important, perhaps a relative, maybe a friend. But as he drew closer, her heart began to race. His path was leading to her grave, her steps faltered. She froze, half hidden behind an old tree, watching him stop exactly where she always knelt. He looked down at the same tombstone, ran his hand over the faded letters, and whispered, "After all these years, I still miss you." Mira's breath caught in her throat. The world around her seemed to fall silent, leaving only the sound of the wind and her pounding heartbeat. Who was this man? How did he know the grave she had guarded for years like a sacred secret? The man stayed there for several minutes, lost in his thoughts. Then, as if sensing her presence, he turned around. Their eyes met, hers wide with shock and confusion, his deep with pain and curiosity. He frowned slightly and asked, his voice low, "Why are you here?" Mira clutched her flowers tighter, her lips trembling. "I come here every day," she replied softly, "to pray for her soul." The man's expression shifted, confusion giving way to disbelief. He took a step closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "You knew her?" Mira nodded slowly. "Yes, I did." He looked down again at the tombstone, his jaw tightening. "That's impossible," he said under his breath. She was my wife. Mira's eyes widened. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The rain began to fall harder, drops running down their faces, though neither cared. Two strangers, bound by one grave, one name, and one story that neither had ever fully known, now stood face to face. Something unspoken hung in the air, a truth waiting to surface. But neither of them could imagine that what connected them wasn't just grief. It was something far deeper, darker, and destined. The rain poured harder, soaking both of them completely. Mira stood trembling, her shawl clinging to her frail frame, while the man's expensive suit darkened under the storm. The silence between them was deafening, filled with questions neither dared to ask. Finally, the man spoke, his voice carrying both pain and authority. "You said you knew her, my wife. How?" Mira's lips quivered. She looked down at the flowers in her hand, then back at the gravestone, her voice breaking as she whispered, "Because once she saved my life." He stared at her, disbelief written all over his face. "Saved you? My wife died 8 years ago." "She was a kind woman," Mira interrupted softly. "A stranger who helped me when no one else did." Her eyes filled with tears as her voice turned to trembling memory. "I was homeless then. My husband had left me. I had nothing but shame and hunger. One evening I fainted outside a restaurant, and she was the only one who stopped. Everyone else walked by, pretending not to see me. But she took me inside, fed me, spoke to me like I was human. She gave me warmth when the world had turned cold." The CEO's eyes softened. He clenched his fists, remembering the woman he had loved. Her kindness, her smile, her heart. "That sounds like her," he murmured. "Her name was Anna. She always believed kindness could change the world." Mira nodded, a faint smile breaking through her tears. "Yes, Anna. I never forgot her name. She told me, when life feels too heavy, just bring flowers to someone who once carried you through it." After that night, I never saw her again, until I read in the newspaper that she was gone. Her voice cracked, the words nearly swallowed by the rain. "So I came here, every day to thank her, to tell her I'm still alive because of her." The man's heart sank. He fell to his knees beside the grave, his composure breaking. The image of his wife, smiling, gentle, selfless, filled his mind. "All these years," he whispered, "I thought no one remembered her but me. And yet you've been here all along." For a long moment, they both knelt there, a billionaire and a beggar, united by grief, gratitude, and a love that transcended wealth. Then, slowly, the man reached into his coat and pulled out an umbrella, holding it over Mira's head. His voice trembled, but it carried warmth now. "You don't need to bring flowers anymore," he said. "She already knows your heart." Mira looked at him, her tears mixing with the rain. "No," she whispered. "I'll keep coming. Not because I owe her anything, but because love doesn't end with death." The man smiled faintly through his tears, the words cutting deep into his soul. He looked at the grave one last time and said softly, "Maybe that's why she brought us together, to remind me what love really means." And as they stood in silence, the storm began to fade. The clouds parted, letting a thin ray of sunlight fall over the grave, as if the woman they both mourned was smiling from above.